All right. Well, welcome to today's episode of First Time Storytelling. I'm very happy to have a guest with me. She's my first young guest she's the youngest person I've ever had on any interviews. So I'm very excited. I should have asked you, Deborah, how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Ola- Olatunji?
Olatunji.
Olatunji. All right, so my guest is Deborah Olatunji. She's an impressive young lady. She's a writer, award-winning poet, activist, public speaker, and an author, published author of Unleashing Your Innovative Genius, High School Redesign. Now, did I mention she's 17 years old? She's a high school senior from Delaware. And again, just an amazing young woman who's intensely passionate about education. And she's here today to share the story of her first time performing spoken word poetry. Welcome, Deborah. Such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the podcast. I love the 365 first, and I'm so excited to share my story with you.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get started with how did you first get introduced to poetry?
So there was a local competition that my twin sister actually told me about 2 days before the deadline. And so I thought to myself, I might as well give it a shot. I turned in the registration form, and then I had about 4 weeks to write a piece. And then I wrote the piece. I ended up going to semifinals and then finals. There were only 7 finalists. And that was where I gave my first ever spoken word piece on stage. And it was titled I Am.
I am. But how did you take us way back to when were you first introduced to poetry? How did it grab you? Why did you fall in love with it?
Yeah, so when I was in the 8th grade, my teacher assigned us this project. We had to create our own poetry book. And that was my first kind of formal introduction to poetry and to studying it, looking at the connotation of words, looking at different styles, using figurative language to describe how we were feeling. And she told us to use many different poems in this book. And I decided that I was going to write a poem for every single person in my class. And there were 30 people in our class. So I wrote 12 lines of poetry for each and every single person, using descriptive imagery, just trying to describe their personality based off of the interactions that we had had all year. And I ended up having so much fun. One of my favorite poets actually is Nikita Gill, and she was the first poet that I was introduced to in the form that your poetry doesn't have to be really long. It can be however length that you want, as long as you get the message that you want across. That's the whole goal of poetry. And so from that book, I think I made around 80 poems, and I still have it with me today, but that 8th grade assignment is really, that's what I would signalize as my first real step into poetry.
Oh my God, that's incredible. So when I think about poetry, I have to say I've written a couple poets before. It just came out of me, but it's definitely not something that I can see myself doing, because it seems like it's a struggle to find the right words, because you're limited on your word usage. You really have to be clear on how you express yourself. So what has that journey been like for you, growing through your poetry?
Well, I went to my first ever writer's workshop this past summer, and that was when I really, really got to hone in on my poetry skills, because I was around other writers. And from that camp, I learned that the first thing that you write down on paper may not be the end of the poem. It may not be the very best. And that's something that you should embrace and enjoy, because that means that when you go in to write a poem, you're not expecting it to be this perfect, polished project. You're just getting your thoughts out there. So the first thing I would do is just put my thoughts on paper and see where the stylish parts of of poetry could be added. But when I take that first step, I'm not being so hard on myself to create a perfect project or create the perfect product that I'm going to end up performing.
Okay, so let's go back into your story. So your twin sister, which I can only imagine what that's like to have a twin sister. Your twin sister brings this up to you. Why do you think she brought this up to you? She knew about your 8th grade project. She knew you were interested in poetry, and this might be something you would like to do.
I definitely think that she thought that I would be into it. And then we also have the way that me and my sisters work, because I have 4 sisters. Actually, no, 3 sisters, actually. 4 siblings. I know. I have 4 siblings with 3 sisters. We are very much in tune with the definition of sisterhood, where we're sharing opportunities. We're constantly looking for ways for the other person to grow. And I think that's why she showed it to me, because she knew that that was something that I could learn from, something that I would have fun doing. And I'm really, really glad that she did, because it ultimately led me to so many different interests that I never thought I would have had if I didn't do that one poetry competition.
So what was it? So it was your first time entering any type of competition?
Yeah.
Okay, so you put out your application. How did you feel? Like, did you feel you had a good shot? Were you just like, it doesn't matter how this turns out, I'm just happy that I applied? Like, what were you feeling and thinking?
So when I wrote the piece, I honestly did not think about, the prize money or whether or not I was going to place. I just wanted to create a piece because the poetry competition was based off of Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. I just wanted to create a piece that resonated with me and would resonate with the audience. And if it resonated with the judges, that would be great. But I just wanted to create something that I would be proud of at the end of the day and happy to perform for my friends and family over and over again.
Oh, awesome. That's a beautiful mindset to have towards writing your piece. So what was it like? How did you feel the first time you read the piece? Was that your first time like public speaking in front of a crowd? Like what was going through your mind the day that you stepped on stage?
So I'm not sure if it was the very first, because I'm also a singer. So I've been on stage before, maybe not directly speaking, but I've definitely been in front of crowds before. But in terms of speaking, it was definitely a different experience. When I went up there, I remember the first time at the semifinals, I spoke a little fast, I think the first time, but then as I was getting into the rhythm of the piece, it just felt natural because you had to memorize it. And so I memorized, I don't even know how many lines of poetry, but it was like 4 pages of poetry that I had to memorize. And it was an incredible experience because I had to take a moment to reflect, to think about how I was going to enunciate certain words, and then how I was ultimately going to do that emotional connection aspect of the piece. Because there were definitely a lot of sad things that I had to talk about and address, a part of his life and the 60s in general. So I think that the emotional connection was something that helped me get to the transition of I'm speaking on stage now, I'm connecting with an audience, and these are people who are hearing what I'm saying and they're trying to observe and reflect on what I've written.
Isn't it interesting when you wrote something, you go to memorize it and you forget it? You're like, I wrote this. Why can't I remember what I wrote? That always happens to me. And I'm like, I came up with this stuff. So how do I forget it?
Exactly.
So when you got done, when you spoke the last word, uh, like, did you look across the audience? Like, what were you thinking? Were you relieved? Were you like, okay, this is it. I did it.
I was definitely relieved at the semis. I kind of just walked away and was like, if I get because they would call you if you end up advancing to the finals. And I was just like, if I get that call, it'd be great. But I definitely feel like I put my best work out there. I definitely took a risk because I made this poem in less than a month. So I definitely took a risk, and I was proud of that for myself. And I was just excited to see what would happen next.
So what did happen next?
So it was a Sunday when I got the call. I actually took a nap because I was so tired, and I did the same thing for like soccer tryouts results. So I think that's my tendency. Whenever there's big news coming, I just go to sleep so I don't have the hours of anticipation and the anxiety just gnawing at you. I just go to sleep. So I went to sleep, and when I woke up, I saw that I had a voicemail, and it was from a number that I didn't recognize. And so I played the voicemail, and it was the founder, Jane Rubini, and she was like, "Hi, Deborah. You're not on the phone right now, but I just wanted to leave this voicemail that you've been selected as one of the finalists." And I was absolutely awestruck. I was just like, oh my goodness. And then I woke up, and I re-woke up. Like, I was completely awake at that point after I'd listened to the voicemail. And I told my mom, and she was also really excited. And I was just like, this is really happening. I have to practice more and, hone it and make sure that the message that I want to send to the entire audience now is really heard and captured.
So I'm going to guess you weren't allowed to change it at all between your first performance and your second, other than how you performed it. But the words, you weren't allowed to change it, I'm going to guess.
You could change some words. What they told the finalists was that you had a certain time until you could change it because you had to send in your piece. So that I think the judges looked at it before. I don't know, but they wanted you to send in the piece so they could look through it, and then whatever you sent in was usually what you performed because you wouldn't be changing words on stage. Otherwise, I think most people would mess up. So.
Yeah. So did you end up changing it, or you kept the original that you'd written?
I think I changed 1 or 2 words, and I think I ended up making up one word. One thing they also gave us was, I know, one thing they they also gave us was a coaching session with a retired AP literature teacher. And so his name is Hugh, and he was talking to me, and he was like, is this, I don't remember which word it was, but he was like, is this word real? Like, did you make this up? I was like, I don't know. And so I found out that I did make it up, and I had to change it. So other than that, I don't think I changed anything else.
Perfect. Love it. So now, so your second time performing at the finals, was it a bigger crowd? Did you now feel more at peace? Like, well, I did this once, same mindset. I'm just going to go out there and perform it.
So there was a much bigger crowd. At the semifinals, it was only, like 7 judges and then a couple of people who stayed around to hear other performances. But at the final event, there were, I think, 100 plus people there. And so it was completely dark on the stage. It was just the light, like the spotlight immediately on the poet. And you couldn't see anybody's faces too clearly, but you could tell that there was a sea of people in front of you, as well as the judges having that front row seat. And it was kind of intimidating at first. But, I stepped on the stage, I took some deep breaths, and then I just said my piece title, I Am, and then I just started and went.
Did you listen to the other poets?
I did. So we all had to sit on the stage as we listened to other people perform. And I was actually the second to last poet to go up.
Okay. So how many were there competing?
There were 7 of us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So was that intimidating listening to the others, or did you just enjoy their work?
I think a part of me was enjoying it, and the other half was, kind of anticipating going up on stage, especially since I was second to last, because that people will get that listening fatigue, which is why they had intermission in between. But I was thinking to myself, I'm the 6th person to go up. How are the judges going to feel after they've heard all these other messages? But then I just remembered why I wrote the piece and the goal that I was trying to get. And then I also realized that a lot of the pieces that were presented weren't similar in any way. They were all unique in their own ways and shapes and forms. And that was something that I really enjoyed about all the poets that presented on that Sunday, because we all got to sit back and listen to other versions of how people interpreted Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, and then really have the moment to share our piece of the story with the rest of the audience.
Oh, well, that's the beauty. I mean, poetry is art, and that's the beauty of art. It's different for everyone. But it sounds like you had a strong mental game going on as you're sitting there, and going second to last is probably not the ideal position to be at, but at the same time, you can be the lasting memory that they have. So how did it turn out?
So the person who got first place was actually the person who went after me, so the 7th person. And then I think the first person got second place, and then I got 3rd place.
All right. How did that make you feel, or how did?
So, I didn't know how to feel first. Like when they were announcing the results, I was just like, okay, I'm digesting this. And then one of the judges who actually lived during the 60s, he was like, I was listening to your piece, and there was so much historical context. And, I'm only one judge of, I think there were 7 judges there. So I wanted to give you first place, but there were definitely other opinions. At the end of the day, he was just like, I loved your piece. I love the message, and you can take this even further than this competition. And I ended up doing that. I performed in front of our governor in Delaware. I performed at schools at a coalition for racial justice, and I ended up performing in a lot more places than I ever would have imagined, which definitely helped me now in 2020 before the quarantine happened, when I was on tour and talking about the book with people. I understood how to connect emotionally because of that experience. And then the other aspect was, since I got 3rd place in 2018, I got to come back for the competition for 2019, and I ended up winning first place.
Hey, awesome. What was that? What was that one about?
So it was called Colorblind, and it was talking about, how different perceptions happen when you are a Black person in America, how people perceive you immediately, and they don't look at you for the positive attributes of your personality or what you can bring to the table or how you want to make an impact. They just have that immediate first impression of your skin color. And I was talking about that piece, and actually at the semifinals, I had to start over 3 times, which is what really got me when I ended up going to the finals for that year, because I had to start over 3 times. And I was really shocked that the judges decided to take that chance on me, especially since I forgot so many times. But I think they knew that I had the words there. It was just a matter of remembering them. And that's why, that piece ended up meaning a lot more. It means a lot more to me, having gone 3 times in the semifinals and then making it to the finals. Both of them, those pieces have a really special place in my heart. But whenever I think about that semifinal experience, I'm just taken back to when I had to start over 3 times before I finally got it and was able to finish the whole piece.
So after all so that's interesting, because after all the experience that you had with the other poem and going around and presenting it to, different crowds, and I mean, standing in front of the governor and doing it, to find yourself with another poem, like forgetting the words, what was going on there? Like, what was that about for you?
I think that I was trying not to get caught up in the idea of, the pride of thinking, I placed last year, so I must have it in the bag this year. I definitely didn't want to have that mindset, because anything could happen. I could be a semifinalist and that's it, or I could make it to the finals. So I wanted to be as open-minded and clear-headed as possible. But on that day, I was just thinking of all the possibilities. My mind was just running rampant with all the things that could go wrong. So I think that that's what happened on that day that caused me to have to start over that many times.
Wow, it's very interesting how sometimes your first time is not the toughest. Because especially if the experience is not, if it is a good experience, it builds up a different kind of mindset and confidence into it. And even though you had the mindset of remaining humble, it gets to you. So that's other powerful lesson. Do you have like something you could read?
I do.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, I can read. Let's see. Do you want to hear I Am or Colorblind?
Your favorite. Let's.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that I'll read I Am. Should I read the whole poem?
It's how long is it?
It's a couple lines.
Okay, go for it.
Okay.
This is a first for me. I've never actually kind of had anybody read poetry to me before.
So both of the poems are actually in my book, because I talk about, how I found my passion through them. But
a really thick book.
Yeah. It is really thick. Okay. I am. As I look into the depths of my mirror, I stand there in all my black girl magic and beauty and wonder, who am I? I am 1968. I'm arguably the most world-changing year history has ever had to sit through, flying to new lands and new territories, bloody wars against Vietnam and lost pieces of glory. From anti-violence to sports discrimination, just 5 years before, Martin Luther King had a dream, when in 1963 he proved his words can move a generation. Now, stay with me. 1968 was a year of waiting for change. Sorry, I've got to flip the page. Waiting for violence, waiting to bring Black voices to silence. April 1968. Dr. King was shot in the right jaw, and a couple seconds later, our hero did fall. But his legacy was only just beginning. The white oppressors thought they were winning, but little did they know we would no longer keep sitting. Uprising. Martin Luther King Jr. was not the only man that died that day. The rage that shook the country on the news of Martin's death caused the anti-violence movement to halt itself and fall out of breath. Lootings, arson, violence, death. How can we move past this? How can we recommence? April 4th, 2018, marked 50 years plus of us still living in fear. 50 years of us trying to move past this feeling of hatred of each other, of each color, being filled with envy and pride, just like the bullet that killed King that night. Our progress is not preset, and people cannot process that prospect. If we want change, it has to happen today. Rewind to 2 months before the assassin was assessing his asset. A march through Memphis was felt and met. Civil rights activists marched tall with their heads up to the sky, looked death in the face and said, "Oh hi." With sandwich boards proclaiming the freedom they sought, their workplaces were unjust, and it was time they stood up and fought. Calling Black men boys and treating white men with poise. $2.35. White men get higher pay. $1.70 for the Black man. Hey, that's 20 cents more than a movie ticket was back in those days. I am a man, and I demand more for what I labor. 1,300 Black sanitation men marched to bring justice in their favor. Tired of maggots and rain. Their hardship was strengthened in their stand, leading to 2 Black men being crushed to death in the pouring rain. 60 others injured, and 16-year-old Larry Payne shot in disdain. The last speech Dr. King ever gave was on the very day before his very own death, on the march in the city of Memphis. Get this, the police brought tear gas and beat people out of their senses. So many people died that year. It was a wild roller coaster that took people up, down, and around in fear. RFK took a bullet by a man who was mentally ill. Shoulda, coulda, woulda been avoided. Sit him down and give him a pill. MLK, JFK, and RFK all died young because of men who were slaves to violence. Now, there were great people who positively shook the country, like Honest Abe over 100 years before, men and women who grabbed injustice by the reins, trying to bring it down to the floor. The Arlington National Cemetery holds so many bodies filled with promise that in seconds their change was buried in a casket. Instead of assassins, let's raise children who will be asked the right questions. No child left behind in poverty or on the list of dishonorable mentions. Instead of firing bullets, let's raise builders who will help build up our country. Instead of hate, we'll put up our hands. In the 1968 Summer Olympic Games in Mexico City, Johnny Carlos and Tommy Smith took a Black Panther salute during the national anthem. We all bleed the same dark red, but they beat us a vile blue. The only color that shines is the white. We wonder, what can we do? I am the year 2000, where Peter Norman of the same Olympic Games was denied his right to march with the alumni Australian team, saying he didn't deserve it after supporting John and Tommy decades before. His name went unnoticed, turned against, and despite qualifying 18 times, they never gave him their token. What good is it if we cannot compete and say our minds? Peter died in 2006, and 6 years later, they finally apologized. I am 2002, still in recovery from the 9/11 attacks. On August 14, 2002, the changemaker standing right in front of you was born and welcomed into a new world that needed love, justice, and racial reform. I am 2017, and this year was not the finest. From DC to the very lack of kindness. Repeat. We were repeating history, with Black athletes taking a knee right before the glory. But now we're undeserving. Apparently, we should be grateful. Grateful for what? For all the many years that America kept snoring, saying civil rights and matters of inequality were just too boring to fix? For that, they have no decision. But against their gun laws, they make no hesitation, take no fall. After all, it's what they want to use to kill us all. Maya Angelou wisely proclaimed, "You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness. But still I rise." We won't keep quiet because I am 2018, a year of change. And like Fannie Lou Hamer said, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. This country needs to open its eyes and stop all these gunshots from being fired.
Oh, you get me in tears.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a very emotional.
Wow, it is. Wow. You cover a lot, and it's very powerful. Sorry. Wow, that's yeah. Okay. We have such a long way to go.
Yeah, a really long way to go.
But that's beautiful, and it's so amazing to have a generation like, that you belong to, that you're part of, and being such an incredible young woman and powerful and, going to do great things. And there's a lot of change that still needs to happen. So thank you for being who you are, and not expect to end up crying.
I wish I could give you a hug right now.
You're getting me all kinds of first times today. So I need to get your book and read it. I mean, that's just, we could be talking forever, because that's just, again, so impressed. And we do need to do this again, because I want to find out more about your book and what that was like for you, and touring and all that great stuff. But I'm going to switch gear a little bit. Let's play the first time lightning round and get me out of my tears. Okay, so the way that this works is I'm going to give you some options.
Okay.
And if it's something you've done before, it's up. So if you were on the app, you would swipe up. And if something you've never done, would like to do, it's right. And if it's something you've never done, don't want to do, then it's left. So, all right. Go to the zoo.
Up.
Up. What was the first zoo you went to?
I think it might have been the Bronx Zoo. I think so. And then there was also a zoo at the at Six Flags.
Okay.
It was a safari, but same idea.
Okay. Well, did you at either place or ever ride a donkey?
Left. I've never ridden a
Never,
donkey.
and don't want to?
Oh, man, I might.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to, so maybe right.
Go right.
I'd love to ride, but maybe after quarantine.
Yeah, it's a great way if you don't want to walk down or up the Grand Canyon. It's a great way to get down there is to ride a donkey. All right, take a photography class.
Up.
She's done that. Do needlework.
Up. I crochet.
Oh, very nice. Well, it's a little different, but we'll go for it. When did you start doing crochet?
My fourth grade teacher actually taught our class of 6. And I still remember, I actually tried yesterday because it had been 8 years. I was just thinking to myself, would I remember how to crochet after all this time? And I just picked up the crocheting needle and my hands just, it was like muscle memory.
Yeah.
I'm actually making a bag right now. So
very cool. Okay. Donate books.
Up. Yes.
Yep.
My junior year, my UNICEF club and I, we actually donated 1,010 books to local libraries and schools that need, more literature. You can never have enough books. And it was a really fun project.
Oh, very cool. All right. Attend a boot camp class, like a boot camp fitness class.
Right. I don't think I have.
Okay. We will add that to the list. Eat sushi. Eat sushi.
Left.
Really? That's not your thing?
No.
Okay. I have to say, like, the first time I had it, I was in Okinawa, Japan, and I didn't like it. But you can, like, that was the thing all my friends did was go out to eat sushi. And I was like, if I want to hang out with them, I got to get to liking this. And I did. Now I love it. Okay. Play croquet.
I think up.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Ride in a cable car.
Right.
Right. All right. So that is the first time lightning round. Now, today's prompt is first time in the ocean or that you saw the ocean. You're in Maryland, so or Delaware, so you grew up by it. But so it's one of those prompts for people who don't live near the ocean. There's some people, it's very later in life that they actually get to see the ocean for the first time. Okay, so the other question is, how are you making the best of the current situation? What's happening with the COVID-19?
I've learned to pivot, which has been tough. Like, there's definitely moments where I've gotten frustrated or I've tried to, there are days where I don't do anything too, but pivoting has been my strategy, not getting hard on myself on those days where I don't feel like being the most productive, and really just listening to my body, and then also communicating more with my family and friends than ever before. I think there's also like FaceTime fatigue that can happen during this time, but I think it's essential in terms of social interaction because we're not leaving our houses. And, a lot of us are missing hugs from people other than our family members. But I've definitely learned to pivot in terms of the way that I talk to people, the way that I talk about the book. And it has meant a lot to me because I've learned so many different ways to engage with people and to be more active, especially during this time when people need more of that love on social media.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So how does it work for your schoolwork? How's that impact all your schoolwork?
So this is my last year of high school, so I'm really, really excited. I mean, there are some things that didn't end as planned, and I don't know if I'm going to have a physical graduation, but online school it's been a love-hate relationship for me. Because, there are some days where teachers will cancel classes and they'll tell you in advance. There's some days where they cancel classes and they don't tell you in advance. So there's been a lot of back and forth with communication, but I haven't had too much of a problem with it. I usually get done all my work by 11 o'clock. It starts at around 8, and I haven't had trouble with the online learning. But there are definitely some classes that I wish we could have online classes for, like English, for example. I love Socratic seminars. I love discussing books with people. And we just finished reading Exit West. The name of the author is not in my head right now, but it was such a great book, and I would have loved to actually discuss it, but we just haven't gotten around to doing that. And we only have, I think, 11 days left. So the teacher still has a chance to do it, or maybe I'll just pioneer it myself and get my classmates together.
just,
You know,
just put a Zoom call together for everybody to discuss it. How do you, I mean, so it has to be tough. Like, how do you feel about not getting the actual graduation? I mean, I really feel bad for seniors that are not going to get that experience.
Yeah, it's been tough, especially when you watch shows and they have their seniors graduating at an actual ceremony. It definitely hits home for me. And then my siblings, my older brother, my older sister, we've all gone to the same high school, and to see their graduations and then not being able to have mine, I think it hurts a little bit more, because I know what I'll be missing out on if we don't have that physical ceremony. So it's definitely been hard to realize that, it might be virtual. We might just get our diplomas in the mail instead of having that final hoorah. So it's been tough.
Yeah, how are your friends handling it? Like, what's the conversation about it? And I got to ask, because I don't think that helps, but the thing that was going on Facebook with post your senior picture, was that a good thing, a bad thing? Or like, why are people doing this?
I was like, that's what I said. I said, why are people doing this? And someone on my Instagram following actually described it best. They said it's basically like showing a homeless person a home. Like, this is what you could have. And that just resonated with me so much. It's just like, that's exactly what it feels like. You're showing us what we can't have because of COVID-19. It doesn't make me feel better to see like old graduation photos, or, this is me and a senior. Like, when I was a senior, I'm like, it doesn't help. Like, it makes
Yeah,
me.
I didn't get it. And I'm like, this, if I was in there, like putting myself in you guys' shoes, I'm like, I would hate you for it, for that very reason. It's like, I'm not going to get it. So you think yours is going to make me feel better.
Mhm.
Um, is there conversation that they might just do it later, or is just going to, like, what's the conversation that the school's having with you guys?
Yeah, so luckily our administration has been pretty open about the options that they're going through, and they did a poll for the students and the parents last week. One of them was have it in June, and then one of them was having it in August. One of them was having it after the class of 2021 next year. And I think that's a little bit extreme, because, it's their moment now, and to have it after their graduation feels a little bit like an insult, because our year passed, and if it wasn't able to work during 2020, it would just feel like we were slighting them. And I don't want to take away from their moment also, because hopefully they get to have a physical graduation. If we don't, that would ultimately be what I would want. And then the other option they gave us was a shout out on the football field. And nobody goes to our football games because our football team isn't that good. But that one hurt even more, because I was just like, no one's going to these football games, so who's going to hear the shout out that you're giving us at this football game? So they're definitely going through the different options. I'm hoping that we can have something in August. If not, but once it goes past September, people are going off to college. They're starting this new chapter of their lives, and it's like you get to the point where you're going to meet up with the friends that you made connections with, but everyone else, you just hope that you see them at some other chapter in your life. But
Yeah, well, you definitely have many other things to look forward to include your college graduation. Where are you going to be going to school?
so I'm going to the University of Pennsylvania in the fall.
All right, awesome. Well, hopefully that that gets on course where you actually get to go there and have physical classes and really get into it. So it's one thing for somebody like me to look at the situation and the impact is, whatever, I have to stay home, but it's impacting people in so many different ways. And for somebody that's in this big transition in life, definitely has a huge impact. So it's great that you have the positive attitude, the right outlook and mindset towards it. But that doesn't change that some of it is going to sting. So sorry. Really, it's going to have an impact on your life. I mean, it's just something that no matter what, it is something, you will be part of that class, and that it's going to be uniquely you guys, is like, if that makes sense. So it's not, right now, it doesn't seem like a really great things to have that's yours, but it will be yours, and it will um, hopefully leave, even though it doesn't sound like it's, some sort of positive mark in the future.
Mhm.
But all right, well, it was a pleasure to have you on. Really appreciate it. Like I said, we definitely crossed some first. You had me crying. Maybe it's the next thing we weren't live, but it's gonna go live. So at least I can say I didn't cry live on Facebook. But oh man. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day, and thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a spectacular day.
All right.